Let's get into it. 1, 2, 3. Let's get some more. Clap your hands. Some more. Just give some more.
Well, hello, and welcome to My Whiskey Den, your favorite public access whiskey review show where craft whiskey is king. And that is no different today because we are talking to David DeFazio from Wyoming Whiskey, which you all know. We tasted some of the Outrider a couple weeks ago with Nancy, and we loved it. We're not gonna lie. We're not trying to kiss your butt, but we did really enjoy that one quite a bit. Yeah. So thank you for stopping in, David. We really appreciate you coming in and giving us some background on Wyoming. Before we start, I want to thank everyone for stopping in the chat. Icehouse, Spencer, Ben, Christy, I see you guys out there. Thanks for stopping in. John, everyone being on time. We appreciate you prompt people because I'm usually not. So I appreciate you showing up on time. And Mike, what do we usually tell the fine people before we start our show at this point?
Don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave a comment down below. Leave a comment live in the chat. Hit that bell notification to find out when new episodes come out. Don't forget, most every Monday night is an Evening With series, just like we have tonight.
Very true. And like we were saying, David, thanks for stopping in. What does everyone in the chat have in their glass? What do you have in your glass over there?
Well, right now I'm drinking a glass of water because, like I was saying before, I was chainsawing a little while ago, so I was sweating. So at the moment, I don't have anything, but I'm probably going to go reach for something here in about 10 minutes.
That's fair. That's very, very fair. I know a couple of the people in the chat had some of the Alliance series already working in the chat and having some drinks of that.
Yep.
And you got that one there. Perfect. I just wanted to roll all the way back, a little bit back in time before you started your job there. You were a river guide in Jackson Hole, am I correct?
Yeah, going way back now. Yeah, right out of college, I took a year off, and I came out here to Jackson to play for a year, and I wasn't out here to find myself or anything. It's just I wasn't ready for law school. So my first job in town was actually as a prep cook at Snow King, and that lasted 2 weeks and realized that I was not cut out for kitchen life. So I then picked up a job as a shuttle driver for a whitewater company, Jackson Hole Whitewater, and that evolved into guiding a little bit by the end of that first summer, but literally a guide had to die before you could get the job. It was such a popular job. And by the next summer, I was full-time guiding and did that for about 5 years, including during law school. I could come out in the summer, be a river guide, go back nice and fresh and tan with all my classmates just completely burn out from interning and not making any money. And terrible.
Now, with that, what class rapids were you guys working on then? Like 3s and 4s? Because I'm just not out there. In Wisconsin, our 2s and 3s that they like to claim are that really I've heard are exaggerated by people with real rapids.
It's so subjective. I mean, there's so many factors that go into it, but out here, midsummer flows, when it's all leveled out, it's a class 3 rapid, and it's fun, it's easy, it's a drop and pool river, which it's, you hit a rapid, there's nothing really technical about it, it's just huge standing waves, usually as a result of a constriction or some sort of obstacle, and then there's a pool behind it. So when you knock all your people out of the raft, you got plenty of time to pick them back up and get them back in, nobody drowns. In the spring, or late spring, early summer, if we've had a big snow year and the runoff is really pumping, it pushes into the 4 category just because of the temperature of the water, volume of the water, and if you fall out, you're not getting back in. You're on your own to get out. So I wouldn't call it tactical. I wouldn't call myself, Mr. Expert whitewater guide, but I did do about 1,500 trips down the Snake.
Okay, that's cool. And just I know with like river guys, a lot of times you're doing the bigger boats. Did you prefer kayaks or did you like bigger boats? Because I know some people do both.
I've never kayaked.
Okay.
I have an inherent fear of the water, actually, and we could go into all of this. But I'll blame my mother. And I would not get into a kayak. The thought of being knocked unconscious upside down in the river is something that I just wasn't willing to accept. So I was always a raft guide. We did a couple of different types. There's the U paddle, and the other one when you have an oar frame. My favorite boat to row was a center frame. These are big dib boats, 20 footers. You got 5 people in the front, 5 people in the back. Rarely did they have paddles, and you just had a lot of control standing middle of the boat, and you could pivot and move. As heavy as those boats were, they're unbelievably maneuverable. So a lot of fun.
Oh, that's cool. That was just something that always interested me because I never played in that as much as I wanted to. So I just thought that was really cool. So you're a river guide in Wyoming, and at that point, what do you want to do with your future? Because it sounded like you were planning on law school. Am I right?
Yeah. So my dad encouraged me to go to law school after taking a year off. I'm glad I followed his lead because so many other people out here, they come for a year and stay for their life, and I needed to do something more than just be a river guide and whatnot. So I went back to law school. I kept guiding during the summers. I graduated from law school in May of '96, and then I actually took the California bar exam at the end of July. My intention was to move to San Francisco and take a run at legal work there, but back to Jackson after taking the bar exam, I had a really really fortuitous meeting, really. My whitewater boss, David Tibbetts, was getting a divorce at the time, and he asked me if I'd like to meet his attorney. And he said, maybe you could do some free legal research and I'll just pay under the table or whatever. And I was like, yeah, sure, whatever, and I didn't think anything would come of this whatsoever. So it was, if I can expound on this for a minute, because it's a funny wrinkle. Monday morning, 9 a.m., we're supposed to be at Kate Meads' office to meet with her, and David was going to introduce me to her. Well, Sunday night at the Stagecoach Bar in Wilson, Wyoming, which is about, 7-8 miles from here, right at the base of Teton Pass, you go to church on Sunday night is what it's called. So it's every Sunday night you listen to the same band, the Stagecoach band, and it's locals night. Everybody, the Stagecoach is pretty much a locals bar. I mean, it's a dive, but it's awesome. So I'm in there on Sunday night. I'm a 26-year-old punk, and my boss wants to arm wrestle me. And I'm like, I'll beat it. So sure, David, let's go. So we're on the corner of the bar, and we go to arm wrestle, and he beats me 3 times straight. And I'm on top of my game. I'm strong. I'm like, how are you beating me? The guy behind me kind of leans in, whispers in my ear, he goes, he's cheating. I'm like, how's he cheating? Because he's putting his arm under the bar to get the leverage. And so he leans in and he does it. And the moment I see him slip his arm under the table, I attack him, right? Because I'm drunk. And so as I do that, as he's kind of reeling back, he just throws a haymaker and hits me right in the eye. And then as it glances off, the zipper underneath his leather coat cuts my cheek. So fast forward to the next morning, I walk into Kate Meads' office, prompt, on time, khaki pants, my own stretch shirt, and a black eye and a cut. And David's 30 minutes late because he's hungover. So I'm just sitting there, looking at Kate like, I must look like a complete joker to this person. And, what happens is we get to talking, and she asked me where I went to college. And so I said, I went to St. Lawrence University. And she said, she like tilts her head like, oh. And I was like, oh, it's this small liberal arts school in upstate New York. She goes, oh, I know where it is. That's where I went. Oh. So
nice.
There's immediate connection.
Yeah.
The St. Lawrence Alumni Network is particularly strong. And due to the unfortunate circumstance of her husband, Brad Meads' mother passing away earlier in the summer, very unexpectedly, they had inherited all of the responsibilities of running a large cattle operation on the ranch, and they had a law firm. I was hired a couple weeks later.
That is a big handoff. We had something like that in town where someone got handed off, something like that, and it's a lot to deal with, especially when you're not expecting it. Or you're expecting it, but you think it's not going to be for 20 years, and that's a big kind of side waylay on that. But no, that's an awesome That's an awesome story. I really enjoy that because that is usually the way weird little things in life happen and turn out.
All true. I promise. Not long ago, I was digging around in a box in my basement, and I see this picture of me sitting on the back porch at the Whitewater place with a black eye. I was like, "See, there it is." I knew it happened.
Well, and you were a lawyer before you started to work at Wyoming. Was there a definitive moment or like a moment of clarity or an event that made you want to actually become a lawyer? Because usually that's not usually. I would say usually people have like a life push kind of in that direction.
Well, I'm talking about my mother a lot here. She was really the one who planted the seed at a young age because I argued with her all the time. There's always an argument. She said, "You're going to be a lawyer." My dad thought I was going to be an engineer. Math came very easy to me when I was younger. And then one day I just hated math and I got it into English. And my mom's like, "You're going to be a lawyer." She just kept saying it. "You're going to be a lawyer." I started looking into it and I was like, yeah, I do like that. You know, I enjoy research. I enjoy writing. I enjoy speaking. I enjoy all those things. And my dad was, in his wisdom, said, "You need to meet with a couple of my attorney friends, figure out, what you should major in." And so I did. And what was really interesting is they're like, yeah, don't do poli-sci, don't do history, don't do government. That's all BS. None of that helps you be a lawyer. You need to be able to communicate your thoughts. Mm-hmm. And so I ended up being an English major.
Nice. That's actually a really good way to do that because conveying it. I mean, being a lawyer is all about conveying your message. I mean, that's really neat. Excuse me. There's a lot. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
Yeah, I knew. That's when I figured it out. Wanted to be a lawyer. I'm glad I am because I think it was a great education, and it's something that I applied towards creating Wyoming Whiskey because if you think back to 2006 when the Meads came up with the idea of creating bourbon, there was no playbook for this. Mm-hmm. There weren't craft distillers in 2006. I think Stranahan's was one of the first, and they're down the road in Denver, but they were one of maybe 2 or 3 in the country. And no one was talking about them. Stranahan's, when they started, suffered the same plight that we did when we started. They got terrible reviews in the beginning, and then have since turned it around. Are now, killing it. But we are at that time. Brad said, we want to make bourbon. I was like, "How do you do that?" He goes, "That's for you to figure out." So I did, and the way you do it is you go to the Kentucky Bourbon Festival and you meet as many people as you can and you ask as many questions as you can, and you quickly learn you got to hire the right people. And that's when Rob Sherman from Vendome Copper and Brass becomes a good friend. Turns out we went to high school together for a year when I lived in Louisville. He was a year older than me. I never met him, but I mean, that was a nice connection. And, he's the one who advised us on what type of still to get. And then once we get that going, I called him and I said, "Hey man, you got to find me a distiller." He said, "What do you mean?" I go, "Well, I'm not going to run the thing. Brad's not going to run the thing. It's going to be terrible." And so long story short, a month later he called and he said, "I found your guy." And I was like, "Well, what do you mean you found my guy?" He goes, "Well, is Steve Nally good enough? He was with Maker's Mark for 33 years. Okay, that's good enough for me. So, that's what you do. You bring in the right people, and you can't have any ego about it. And you just got to find out, what's the issue. And then in law, it's IRAC, IRAC, issue, rule, analysis, conclusion. And with this, it's, hey, what's the issue? What do we have to figure out? Okay, who's the expert on this? Let them tell you how to finish it and then do it, execute. And that's how I approached it. So it was very helpful. And of course, there's regulatory pieces and all that being a lawyer is very helpful with. But overall, I found it's just a good way to, to think your way through it.
No, excuse me, that really is. To kind of be a little bit helpful, we had a friend who was opening a distillery in Canada, and he was getting the runaround from some inspectors for like 6 or 8 months, and he finally won. But he's like, it was a testament to just dealing and putting up with them at that point. So
Right.
that'd be a little helpful to help maybe lean on them a little bit. Not saying you did, but maybe I would have.
So, at what point in your this journey you've taken did you get into whiskey?
Well, like I've said it a ton of times, I drank a lot of Jack and Coke in college. So that was my first like whiskey. But my dad is the one who introduced me to bourbon and to drinking good bourbon. And by drinking, sipping, not shooting. Poured me a glass of Elijah Craig 18. And he said, here, I want you to sit down with this, put some ice in it if you want, and we're going to sip on this. And I want you to really taste it. And that was when my eyes were open to what a good whiskey could be. Our partnership with Edrington, you would think would be, just dream come true because I'd have access to all this scotch. I can't stand scotch. I really and I remember I was talking to Chris Spalding, the president of Edrington, when we were early stages of negotiation and whatnot. And I said, is this going to be a problem that I don't drink scotch? I don't like it at all. And he said, oh, we'll get you to like it. I'm like, dude, the people that have come before you who've said the exact same thing, it's not going to. So anyway, back to your original question. Elijah Craig was the first. And then Brad and I, my partner, he and I started exchanging bourbons over the years for birthdays and barbecues and everything. And like I said, the choices were finite back then. You've got the Basil Haydens and the Knob Creeks and all that, which were the specialty small batch items. And you had, what else would you have had? Like Blanton's, things like that. And so we would always try to find the better bourbon, and it's just the one with the higher price tag. And we didn't have the palate to really work our way through this. But we always came back to one product, and that interestingly was Maker's Mark. We liked the weeded profile. And so when we found Steve, bingo, we wanted to do a weeded bourbon. Even if we didn't necessarily know it at the time, when we first started, we figured that out. And Steve, let's see, we're 18 minutes in. Steve didn't think that anything other than weeded bourbon was worth a shit to make. And so that's why we got going with weeded bourbon. And I'm glad we did, because I do prefer a weeded profile over a rye profile. However, that doesn't mean that I don't love, rye bourbons. I mean, there's so many of them. Four Roses. I'm a big fan of Four Roses, for instance. Small batch, I think, is one of the greatest values on the shelf.
Mm-hmm.
Long answer to a short question.
No,
that's a good answer.
That is a very good answer. Excuse me. When you're working with friends, like you were with the Meads, a lot of times there has to be a right flow or right fit for it to like work out smoothly. Have you seen relationships in business, or I have seen relationships in business crumble? You've worked with them on several projects. What makes them so accommodating to work with or work for?
I think in the beginning, the reason why Brad asked me to be a part of the whiskey company is because he trusted me. And I had such great admiration for their family. Brad's brother was running for governor when we were getting this going. His grandfather was two-term senator and governor of Wyoming. And I just like being close to that level of, I don't know, history really, because Wyoming's a very young state. And I got to know his grandfather before he passed away at the age of 97. You just sit in that guy's office and he tells you stories of the U.S. Senate and, fascinating stories. Strom Thurmond flat-backing a senator from Texas because he pulled him the wrong way, And so I had such admiration for the family. They've been called the Kennedys of Wyoming. And so I would never, ever do anything that would bring disrepute to the Mead family. And I think when I worked in their law firm for a few years, he learned that I was 100% honest and forthcoming about things. And so I'm pretty sure that's why it started. And I've never deviated from that. And have there been difficult times? Absolutely. You're dealing with a family, it's Brad, Kate, and their son Sam was our distiller for 4 or 5 years, and there were challenges. There are always challenges, and I believe so much in the company that I've stuck with it. And if I didn't believe in Wyoming whiskey, I would have been gone a long time ago.
Oh, nice.
I'm a stubborn son of a bitch. I want things my way. And, when you're in a company, you can't have it your way all the time. And so sometimes I was wrong. Sometimes I was right. But whatever, you need to keep moving forward as a team. And I do my best.
Nancy just stopped in. She wants to say hi to you. And happy to have you on the show. She said she's going to go hop off. Maybe she's in the middle of trying to wrap up some more stuff. She is a very busy lady. So anytime, like, it sounded like when she was working with you guys, anytime you're tasting 100 to 200 whiskeys a day, I think that would be tiresome.
Yes, whatever Nancy wants, Nancy gets. Although she better be ready for my phone call tomorrow morning, Nancy, if you're still listening.
So have you noticed your obviously let's go out on a limb and say you're not going to switch to Scotch anytime soon, but is your palate evolving, is doing this, or have you pretty much stayed true to what you originally saw, like with Elijah Craig 18? This is my thing.
Yes, it has evolved, and due in large part to Nancy. I mean, when I sit with her and she teaches me about what I'm smelling and what I'm tasting and why, more importantly, that's, to me, all very fascinating. I mean, I like to consider myself a student, and I like to learn as much as I can, but I have certain limitations, and that is my palate is not great. On my best day, it's good. On its worst day, it's absolutely terrible. I'm never great. And when Nancy sits there and tells me, "Oh, can you pick out those notes of hibiscus tea?" And I'm like, "You're crazy." But she can taste all those things. You guys know how great she is.
Oh yeah.
But I can't get those types of nuances. That's just not me. What I have kind of figured out in all these years of drinking different bourbons and whatnot is I like a light to medium bodied bourbon with light to medium mouthfeel. I don't like super heavy bourbons. I don't like over oaked bourbons. I don't like 20-year-old bourbons. I don't like all of that. Mm-hmm. Does it have its place? Yes, of course. Mm-hmm. If you got a porterhouse steak in front of you and a cigar in your right hand, you're going to want a super aged oaky bourbon in front of you. I don't normally do all of that. I don't smoke cigars, but maybe once a year and all that. So there are moments, I think, for everything. Mm-hmm. And so all the products that are out there, I appreciate them all. I really do. But if I'm going to just reach for something where I'm going to have 2 or 3 of them, I'm going to want that lighter bourbon. And when it comes to our warehouses, I would want the barrels that are going to come from the bottom half of the warehouse. Some sort of batch of that, or a single barrel from the lower part. 90% of the time. The other 10% of the time are those exceptional times when you want to have something that's spicier and more full-bodied and more robust.
You were just mentioning the lower to the upper levels. Do you guys have a climatized warehouse since you're in Wyoming? Nope, just normal. Okay, okay, nope. Just making sure on that.
Which is a challenge because right now the barrels are going into hibernation, and whenever they get below 40 degrees Fahrenheit, aging ends, and they take on some really unfavorable notes, like wet grass. And so once they get cold, we're done. Nancy won't be back to do any more tasting from this point forward. She won't come back until spring, and every year spring seems to move further and further back, almost to June now. And that's a challenge because these barrels aren't warm enough to taste. And then all of a sudden we're pressed. We have to, make them warm. I keep telling Derek, make them warmer. Because they're not temperature controlled. Someday, I would think in the not too distant future, we'll probably have a smaller warehouse that is heated where we could keep a couple hundred barrels so that we can keep our private stock program going. And if we have to do some emergency blending over the course of the winter, if there's a big order, we can do that. Now nice. It's a challenge of planning for the next 6 months. Nancy and Derek batched probably no less than 8 batches between now and May that we'll have to produce. And that's a lot of looking forward. So it's a testament to him and Nancy and all the work that they do for us.
That type of vision is awesome when you can see that far in advance. I mean, obviously you have to know a lot about it, but just to have the forethought to be thinking 6 or 8 months in advance for releases is pretty impressive. So,
and I like doing that. That's part of the legal training. Or not. Maybe it's just I'm a planner, but I do like thinking about, okay, here's what we need to have lined up. Unfortunately, sometimes you still can't do it. There's just limitations to space, or there's limitations to tankage, or any of those things, and we can't do certain things that we want to do. And that, for me, I'm impatient, and I just want to kill people when I can't do what I want to do. So,
do you see that as any kind of advantage, that it's a forced hard break that you have to take? Like, we don't have a choice. We know this is coming. It's making people plan more. It's making people put more things on the calendar that maybe is an advantage to you.
I think it's good to take a break because they work really hard in Kirby. And so from a labor perspective, yes. From a planning perspective, yeah, we do have to be thinking a lot about the future. My horizon line was always, there's 2 horizon lines, 6 months and 5 years, because 6 months is how long we had to wait over the course of the winter, and 5 years is how long we have to wait at a minimum between when we lay it down to when we harvest. So that's how my thinking has been. As soon as you start visiting with the Edrington folks, when they think generationally, that's mind-blowing to me. Like, they're planting oak trees right now that won't be harvested until the guy who's planting it or woman who's planting it is dead. And then that wood will then be aged a certain way, and then barrels made and sherry placed in them for 3 years. And I mean, to think about it that way is mind-blowing and really impressive. So, when I thought I was all proud of myself for my planning, no, I'm not planning for anything past my life at this moment, other than a will. And people that work for Edrington, for these Scotch companies, are planning for things that are going to happen in 50 years. And that's impressive.
So tell me a little bit about, I'd read a little bit how the Meads basically were looking to diversify, and so their business, and that's how they kind of came up with the idea of let's do a distillery. But there was a bit of a debate between doing a winery versus a distillery, I understand. How did they end up saying, let's go with the distillery route versus the winery?
Well, Brad would tell you a far more blunt answer than I will, because out of politeness to Kate and Brad and the family, Kate was the one who originally came up with an idea of doing something in the alcohol sector.
Okay.
So she said to him, hey, I think we should plant grapes and start a vineyard. And Brad said, after some time, I think that's a bad idea. We don't really have the climate for it here, but we do have the climate for growing grain, and all the grain that we're going to need is currently grown in the Bighorn Basin. Kate didn't let go of it right away, and once we got going and once I was brought into this, they both asked me if I could find out if we could do any grapes. So I brought in a guy named Bob Mazza from Mazza Vineyards, and he is a very close family friend of mine. My dad taught him in college, actually. And side note, back in the early 70s, Bob said to my dad, hey, David, I got a great idea. I think this thing is just going to go gangbusters. My dad's like, what's that? He goes, it's called a microbrewery. My dad said, it'll never work. So, but anyway, Bob and my dad have been friends forever. And if you're familiar with him, 5 and 20 Distilling and Mazza Vineyards and all that. So he came out with his son, and they did some soil sampling and looked at historical weather patterns and said, yes, you could grow 1 or 2 varietals there, but we think it's a bad idea. So that idea, went away.
Yeah. I'm curious about the wheat you guys are using, because Well, for me, I first experienced Wyoming, the small batch, about 2 years ago. And for me, it was love at first sip. And it's so distinct. You talk about Maker's Mark, you talk about a wheated bourbon, but it's got such a different flavor profile than what I typically experience with a wheated bourbon, especially from Kentucky or somewhere. So is there a particular varietal of wheat, or, what you guys malting at all, or anything like that that just gives us such a unique flavor profile that I love? It was one of my top 5 whiskeys for last year, the small batch. I really enjoyed it. So,
well, thank you for your kind words. That means a lot, especially coming from someone like you. I guess the long answer to this, because I think this is important for anybody to know about Wyoming whiskey, is we're not doing anything particularly clever. We're doing things out of necessity. So when you ask about a wheat varietal, no, we're not getting into the heirloom wheat and any of those things that you hear a lot of craft distilleries doing for whatever reason. We are growing wheat that is the most hardy wheat we can grow here in Wyoming. It's a very short growing season, so it's a winter wheat. You plant it in the fall, it pops up in the spring again, and it's got a head start. That's why you plant winter anything. It's because the growing season is so short. So the wheat, I could give you the exact hybrid number, but other than that, it's not Davy Crockett didn't bring this to Wyoming and plant it, and we're using it. No. Same thing with our corn. Our corn is a 91-day corn, meaning it matures in 91 days, and that's about the growing season here. We used a 92-day, but that hybrid was discontinued by our seed producer, and so Brent Regath and his wife Sherry, who are fantastic people, they have been experimenting with different hybrids, all non-GMO, mind you, over the course of the last 10 years, and they've come up with this 91-day is the best corn we can get. It is hardy. Last year there was in the fall, and it was so wet throughout the year, there was very little sun to grow the corn. Our corn did great. This year it's been so damn dry, but it's irrigated. Corn is falling off of the stalks because it's been so dry in the basin. Our corn's hanging on. So this is a really good corn strain for what we do here in Wyoming. And, so that's why we're malting. Yes, our barley is malted, but and our rye is grown right here as well. It's a winter rye. So it's not sexy. That's not the sexy part of our story. It's just that works.
But it's like you said, it's not like super craft, but it is also what you said works appropriate for your area, and that almost like does make it craft, because if you want something to be consistent and you want your yields to be the same, at least close to the same every year, you're going to want something that is consistent like that. So that's awesome. That's cool.
But in that sense too, we throw the word terroir around a lot here recently with whiskey, but it's like you're tasting Wyoming in a sense, because you're using local grains pretty much that's grown close to you, and it's got there is a distinct profile. You guys using column stills or pot stills or what? What kind of still?
We're using a traditional Kentucky column with a pot behind it. It's an 18-inch wide, 38-foot tall column with a 42-inch doubler behind it. So when we modeled this, like I said earlier, there was no playbook for craft distilling. So we took the maker's playbook and just downsized it.
Okay.
Making it the same way they do. If you were to walk into our distillery after going into Maker's, you'd say, oh, it's the same, just smaller.
Right.
So, the flavor profiles that you get off of a column, we're getting all of that. I think that what you are getting at here as far as our terroir, which is a word that our partners at Edrington have introduced to us, that's not a word that we would have ever used independently. Wyoming, that's not a word Wyomingites would use.
They might pronounce it differently.
If Nick Cozzolino is listening right now, he's going to murder me tomorrow. But they wanted to bring a subtle refinement, and sometimes not so subtle refinement, to Wyoming whiskey, and so they use this word terroir. I just always say the environment is so vastly different here in Wyoming than in Kentucky that you're going to get a different flavor profile because of the high range grasses and sage that surrounds our warehouses, and the fact that it gets 135 degrees in the top of our warehouse at the hottest in the summer and it gets -5 degrees in the middle of winter. It might be 20 below zero, but it's, that thermal mass keeps it a little warmer.
Yeah.
You don't get that in Kentucky. What does that temperature change do to it? I don't know exactly. It's also very arid here. We would have thought we would have had more angel share loss, and we don't. I think that's because we have metal buildings and a concrete floor, so you're not sucking it out. But I do think that the terroir that you get from the grains themselves has a pretty big impact. I think the yeast that we have selected has a big impact, but I think far and away the largest impact is the fact that we have, these temperature controlled warehouses that are breathing in the Wyoming environment and all of the things that it has to offer. There's no bluegrass here, big difference from Kentucky.
Nancy was just saying that all the grains that were grown in the Bighorn Basin actually taste really good, even if they are workhorse grains, as she puts them. I don't want to downgrade the grains or anything like that, but
I thought she was jumping off. She started to make me look at
She just can't leave.
Yeah, patch her. Is there any way to patch her in?
There is. If you give me a second here, you guys ask other questions, and I can work that up. Give me a second here.
So, are there some grains that you want to use?
There's a malting facility, and not a malting facility, but Breeze Malting is not far away. They have a huge receiving area for all of the barley that's grown in the basin, and most of that is shipped out of state. But when I visited there once, they're great people. They had 20 different malted barleys out, and you smell each and every one of them, and it really showed off all of the things that they could do with it. And I have always been interested to see what we would be able to do with that. And God forbid we make an American single malt, because I'm not a Scotch guy. But what could you do with that malted barley? So there's that. But as far as using all of these specialty grains that you hear about and millets and things like that, I haven't been tempted to do that. I like the flavor profile that corn, wheat, and barley gives us. And the only thing I would like to experiment a little more with is maybe different barrel finishes. And by barrel finishes, I mean new barrel finishes. Independence Dave started selling us some 18-month yard-aged wood, char 3, with every 8th barrel being toasted heads. Those barrels are going to become mature here very soon. And it's that toasting that really has me a little excited about what that's going to do to our bourbon. And so I like those types of finishes versus finishing it in Chardonnay barrels and whatnot. That I'm more of a traditionalist.
And I like that with, like, you're talking about the actual finishing and the toast. There's a lot to play with to kind of create something a little unique. So I was going to say the toasting the barrels is something we found this year that we've enjoyed. Also a lower char on a couple things where it was a number 2 char in toasted barrels. Really surprising how much it let the grain pop forward in a couple things. But you mentioned it, so we do have it. Nancy hopped in here, and I got to get rid of the other screen.
And she's got a hat.
Yeah,
Nancy,
I've had a haircut since February, so.
Yeah.
And I will be ready for our meeting in the morning, David. So.
excellent.
Although I'm really enjoying some Outrider right now. I mean, some hole in the wall right now. So.
And on that note, to cause issues with everybody, I think we should cheers everyone in the chat and everyone here. So thanks for stopping in.
Cheers.
We want you to have a little sip to keep it going. We have some time left on the stream. So
I'm going to go grab a glass. Give me 30 seconds.
Okay. Oops, hold on.
So Nancy, he was just talking about finishing barrels, different things. Looking at just the flavor profile of their standard small batch, what would you love to see it finished in? What would be something to complement that you would like to see?
Well, I can tell you, I don't know if I'm at liberty to say this or not.
And he's not here, so it's all. Oh no, it's
not. David, Todd, all of y'all, when I was there last week or the week before, or I don't know whatever week it was, a week ago those Edrington sherry casks that the double oak or the double cask is finishing in. Those are tremendous. I am so excited about those coming out. I mean, they're just I think that's going to be the best expression of that product that we've had to date. Really good.
There you go, gentlemen. She's stealing my limelight here. On the show,
I'm not
away. I can
just
go.
put it down.
No. Well, and she was. I think Ben asked her what she would like to see something finished in. Is there a different barrel, or I think we just asked you. You'd rather play with the toasting and stuff of it, but is there a different finishing barrel you'd like to use, David?
Not necessarily, because like I said, I like bourbon as it is, but. And even though Nancy was trashing me, I'm going to say some nice things about her. What Nancy brings to us and to any distillery that she works with is an ability to really work magic with what you have in the warehouse. And she just mentioned that she's having some hole in the wall. That to me is the finest product that we can make when it comes to a batched product. Now, Outrider would be a very, very close second, but Hole in the Wall is a marriage of that's 8 barrels of a very specific flavor profile that we have had some great luck with. And I love the ability to batch really, really great flavors together because Nancy is so talented at doing that. Without Nancy, we couldn't do that. So by using, we have thousands of barrels laid up, and the ability to pick them based upon Nancy's suggestion and how to blend them and slow reduction process and all of those things, we're able to produce a real interesting diversity of bourbons from one mash bill with one type of charred barrel. And so that to me is exciting. And she just picked our barrels for next summer. We don't have a name for what that's going to be yet, but that'll be our Wyoming only release. So I really like, if Nancy, if this is the right word, challenging Nancy to come up with a flavor profile that's a certain type. And then, she nails it every time. And that is exciting for me. As far as finishing barrels, our double cask to me is, I think it's outstanding.
Really
but
good.
But it's my least favorite. Because it's adding things to what I consider to be already great. And double cask to me is the perfect whiskey to put in a Manhattan. You put that in a Manhattan, unbelievable. I'll put that up against any whiskey on the shelf for making a Manhattan. So I think each of our bourbons or whiskeys has its place. I just happen to think that for sipping purposes only, I think our Wyoming only releases can't be beat.
David, I wouldn't mind adding something to that too. The fact that this year that we're getting started a whole year early on the Wyoming releases, and getting started in that blending process whole year early is really going to make a big difference. I mean, I love Hole in the Wall. It's one of my next to the current Outrider. Well, I'd have to say the current Outrider and Hole in the Wall are my two favorite releases to date. But having a whole year to actually work on a blend is just taking it to a whole other level. I've been waiting for this day for a long time.
I have too.
Yeah. So yeah, and I think what we've got in store for the Wyoming releases for next year is really going to be special. It's the fact now that we're planning in enough time, a year ahead, and actually more than a year ahead now.
Right.
Is really it makes all the difference.
And I think to your point about you've raised Outrider a few times. That's what I have in my glass right here. I actually have a barrel in my wall that I tap directly from, literally. And so Outrider is the whiskey that I put in there. And there are now 4 different vintages, if you will, of Outrider that have all been placed into that barrel. So what would that be, a Solera type of an approach, Nancy?
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
I'm just gonna say I'm jealous, just because we've tasted some Solera things, and that sounds like a really interesting way to handle the process. I would definitely do that at the end of things, like, oh, we have some left. It goes in this barrel in my wall.
Make it big enough. I mean, it's a 10-liter barrel, and it's always been Outrider. Right? Just because, I mean, Outrider really is the best thing that we make, I think, in most people's opinion. And I tend to agree. I just, like I told you guys earlier, I like the wheated bourbon more than I do rye forward stuff. But I think I'm in the minority. I think most people would say that Outrider is the greatest thing we've ever put out. I know you would agree, Nancy.
I'm definitely in the Outrider camp, although I tell you, my hole in the wall bottles have really put a hurting on. So they're really in pain right now.
Sometimes that's how you know what you like the best, and you don't even realize it. All of a sudden, you're like, "Oh, this only has 2 drinks left, and I don't remember having any of it whatsoever."
Right.
Spencer in the chat brought up a question. He wanted you guys to talk about how the process of working with Crowded Barrel and the Alliance series. How did that work, or how did that go for you guys working with them?
I didn't have too much involvement with it after the inception of the whole partnership. They talked to me for a while leading up to it. They asked me a bunch of questions. They asked if we'd be willing to send some whiskey down there. And once I got my partners to sign off on it, because we were always very cautious about sending things out to people because we don't know how good the end product is going to be.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. But they convinced us that they would do a great job. And so once the thumbs up was given, I turned it over to Sam at the distillery when he was still our distiller, and he picked the barrels that they wanted and sent them down for aging. And they were very easy to work with. They're great. I love those guys. They're hilarious. Yeah,
they do have a lot of fun. So I'm not gonna complain about Dan Norrex. They're a good time. That is true.
I want one of the necklaces that they wear.
A big bling.
Yeah,
the Flavor Flav medallions that are.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I have a few friends that have them, but they're heavier than what you would think. Like they got a little weight to them. I wasn't quite expecting that the first time. Now I know you guys. We talked about Edrington earlier. What made you guys want to do a deal with Edrington, and did you guys retain control over the distillery, or what was like the inside facet to that? Because I think it would be hard to give up the internal control over something you worked so hard and made it come to fruition.
We realized after a number of years of making whiskey and selling that we could do everything except one thing, and that is gain distribution. Because a small distiller, let me tell you this story. And you could pick the distributor. It doesn't matter who it is. But if any of the distributors that matter, the larger ones, you walk in, you're in the boardroom, you meet with whatever VP and a team of people, and they tell you what they can do. But what they don't tell you is what they will do. And it's very misleading. And unless you're really focused on that, you will leave that room saying to yourself, wow, it's amazing. They've got this many salespeople and they could do these programs and they can do these things. But what you don't realize, especially early on, is that they're not going to do that for you. You have to build your brand. Distributors are not brand builders, and they don't tell you that. So, you go into Acme Distributing without picking anyone apart, and after 6 months, they've done nothing. They barely have it in their computer system and their ordering system. And we did this over and over again. And the best luck we had was with small distillers or distributors, sorry. But you didn't get the reach. Mm-hmm. And so we realized that we had to do something different. And we talked about bringing in venture capital and partnering up with a couple other distillers and trying to get a sales force of our own. We didn't want to do that. Then we talked about there were a couple of different companies that wanted to invest, and they knew people in the distribution world. I don't care who you know. The bottom line is unless your product is adding to the bottom line, they're not going to do anything for you. That's just a fact of life. And I'm not trashing distributors by saying that. That's just true.
Mm-hmm.
So Brad and I were talking extensively about, well, how are we going to solve this distribution problem? How are we going to grow? And finally, I was like, I want to go to the Shanken Impact Seminar in New York City. And for something about that just stood out to me as being an opportunity for me to get in front of some people who mattered. And so, it's an expensive ticket. I want to say it's a $5,000 ticket for a day, basically a night and half of a day. But I gave my card to everybody that I could find that I found interesting and took their cards and followed up. And that set off a chain of events that led to about a dozen companies that you would all know that took interest in us.
Okay.
And Edrington, it was interesting. A couple of them weeded us out right away because we weren't big enough. We weeded a couple of them out right away. I'm sorry, Nancy, is there something more important than our podcast?
It's just my identical twin, yeah. I'm doing it.
So we weeded each other out, and it really went on down to about 3 or 4. And then at the end of the day, there were 2 companies that were really left standing. They were both very similar, and Edrington was one of them. And we really liked the fact that they're owned by a charitable trust. We like how they approach. Macallan is the gold standard, really, and Highland Park, really, when it comes to Scotch.
Oh, yeah.
And, they had a lot of sway with distribution, and they've got their own commercial team of 100 people across the country. So all of it really worked out great. They've got a younger crew of people in New York City that's almost like a startup. They haven't been, Edrington Americas hasn't been around for a long time, 10 years maybe. And so I like the fact that it's not 80-year-old white guys. They're incredibly young in a good way. They're incredibly diverse, and they've got a lot of experience. They're hired, and they're good at what they do. So I really like working with them. I'm sure some of them would say they hate working with me because of my complete impatience, but they're great. I really like working with them overall.
And did you guys give up any control when you took that, kind of joined with them, or do you guys make all the decisions with the whiskey still?
We still own a majority interest.
Okay.
And that could change in a few years depending upon how things go. We run operations. They run all the marketing and sales. Okay. So that's pretty much where the lines are drawn. But that doesn't mean that I'm just working with Nancy and going rogue and we're coming up with stuff. It's, I pass things by them either after Nancy and I talk or before we talk and see, if this fits into what their vision is for us in the long term. And so it's a team. It's a partnership. And, when you're in a partnership, you make sure everybody knows what's going on.
Nice. Excuse me. That's awesome. I was going to say, that's actually really, 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 I just thought it was interesting because forgive me, because there's so many different whiskeys out there that sometimes things slip past me. So I missed it when you guys joined with them, and I was like, I do remember that moment when all of a sudden you could find them on the shelf all of a sudden here and in a lot of other places. I'm like, I remember when that hit. I was like, yeah, you could find that here. I'm like, and I never had it before, it just did not correlate with me that something like that had happened. I just maybe you got lucky and found a good distributor, and we know you weren't bad-mouthing them because that is the way everyone else has talked about them in general as well too. So it's not like anything different that you have said.
Yeah, it's I'm thrilled to be with them, and for me personally, for me professionally, that was a hugely what's the right word? All the hard work was we were not vindicated. It was a big approval, like to know that Edrington, the king of the Scotch world, has chosen us to be their American Spirits horse in the race. And that to me meant a lot. It was a huge pat on the back, and like we did it right. And when Brad tasked me with this in the beginning, he said, we have to do this right. What the hell does that mean? I don't know what right is. You know, I'm in the and the bottom line was no shortcuts. And, you know, if you lift the sheets, you can't be embarrassed about what people find. And there it is. You know, there's no secrets about us. I mean, Nancy, you know, we don't hide anything.
Absolutely. You know, 100% transparent. And that's, you know, part of what's made me want to be part of this whole thing now for 6-7 years.
And, you know, we've been honest about our mistakes. You know, we made a big mistake in the beginning, and we've made mistakes ever since. That's part of it. But I think that's also what makes us so real, is that we're willing to cop to it and be like, hey, thanks for sticking with us. We're getting better.
When I went into researching, that was something that, like, I totally had a lot of respect for you for what you're doing, because I had seen you take responsibility for like one or two of those early barrels, and just being honest, like, we just didn't wait long enough. We were excited about it. We wanted to get going with it, and like, but that wasn't the right thing to do. And not everyone would have said that. You know, a lot of people would have kind of covered it up or been like, well, that barrel didn't turn out well. I appreciate that you took that, and then where you guys went from that, it just shows the growth and expansion that takes place in a distillery, because there's a lot of places that waited longer and put out stuff, and it wasn't good. You know, like they didn't give it, they waited the full time and it still didn't hit. And 2-3 years later, they worked out some of the kinks or something else happened. So I appreciate that you did that. Just a great deal, because there's not enough places that do take proper ownership of mistakes. And I think it's something, hell, if I started a distillery, I'm going to tell you, I'd have fucked up like 5 or, you know, like there's a few batches that would have gone out like as you're doing it. Like, I think you talked to Nancy when they said, I don't know who it was, but someone like didn't clean out one of the stills right at somewhere along the line. And I was like, that I ruined a whole batch doing that. That would have been fucking me one day, just by me forgetting something, you know, like I'm like, I could see how all those things happen, but it's awesome that you do that. And I think as a whiskey community, we appreciate people who do that. So thank you.
You'll get nothing but it.
Yeah,
like I said in an answer to the question earlier, I think that's one of the reasons why Brad wanted to work with me, is because he knew I'd be honest about things. And yeah, I've made some mistakes along the way. I've cut things real close, like getting our cola approval for our first batches of Wyoming whiskey that I got like 2 months before, and then the printers, we had to get them, you know, all sorts of things. But yeah, you'll never get anything but truth from us. And take it or not, it's who we are, and it's who the Meads are. The Meads have always been honest people, and you know, Senator Hanson, I just think back to him and what he was like, 100% honest all the time.
Yeah, no, I deeply appreciate that, because I read that as well. I think early on, I can't remember specifically the compound you guys found that was causing a problem, but how I guess you mapped out your distillate or something, and were able to just go through the whole process and figure out what you were doing wrong and make the corrections. And the fact that you were transparent and honest with it, for us as a whiskey community, that helps us learn as well about what you guys go through,
Right.
how you make things work, and how sometimes it doesn't work. And the fact that you're willing to take the steps to that length to get the product right, and sitting here sipping on this and sipping the small batch, and I can say, man, you got it right.
Thank you. And
Yeah.
we did a lot to get it where it is, and the person that's appearing next to me here on this screen is a large part of getting us right. So
Yeah, that's well, and I have to say, you know, the absolute transparency in the company is part of what has made me want to be part of this for as long as I have, since it's now been October 2014. But it's not just that; it's the commitment to learning from mistakes and to excellence. Ultimately, to really, you know, in the final analysis, learning how to create something that is truly excellent. That you know, has made me want to be part of the whole enterprise. And the fact that David and the Brad and Kate and everybody just really strives to do something exceptional. And if you don't get it right first take, you try again. And until we just get it to where we want it. And I'm so proud of the work that we've done. Especially in the past few years, I think things have really, we're just really seeing things finally pay off.
Right.
Sense and I couldn't be more proud of the work that we've done.
When we had the double cask, I said that was one of the few whiskeys, not one of the few where it was a wonderful marriage between the finish, where it was light and it was playing the right role in it, rather than there's so many other ones that are a sherry bomb or a port bomb that like slap you in the face and they want to be like that rye that kind of half chokes you out when you get into it. It was one that just took the flavors that were there and just kind of hinted at stuff in the background where it really played nicely with it. And that's something that I'm beginning to appreciate more, is like the subtle nuances of all tying these things together and having hints that accentuate the stuff around it. And there was a while, like with ryes, like I don't mind getting slapped around. Same way with some port finishes and other things like that. It's okay to get slapped every now and then. I don't mind it. But to notice the nice little nuances is something that not everyone hits on, or not all distilleries hit on. So I was like you were saying, where you're coming into that, you guys are there and you're really creating some nice nuanced things. So
to your point on that, Nancy will recall when I first approached her about barrel finishing. It's like, okay, we've got our small batch, we've got our single barrel, we've got our private stock program, we've got Outrider. And I was like, is there a secondary maturation that we could do that would complement what we're doing, not mask? And, not to trash other craft distillers, but because we've been there, like early on, if we had our young product and we needed to do something in order to make it better, you would try to find something that would mask those off-putting flavors and then maybe overpower you with the port or whatever. But we were not in a position where we needed to do that. So that's why I challenged Nancy. I was like, what would work? And early on, Nancy, correct me if I'm wrong, but she had wanted to work with a very specific type of port, and we couldn't find the barrels.
Right.
And so then we shifted gears and we went to the Pedro Jimenez sherry casks, which she found to be a very, very close second on her list of what we should use. And everybody who loves double cask says the same thing. It enhances, it complements the big spirit,
exactly,
versus masking anything. And I'm very proud of that product. I hate to. I'm sorry I said it's my least favorite earlier, but
honesty is okay. We're good with that on the show, man. That's good.
It's just my flavor profile. Like what I like, that's not right in the heart of it. If it's a target, it wouldn't be the bullseye. It would be the next ring around is where I would put that. But what we've done with it, I think, is absolutely spectacular. And it's so interesting. I've met thousands of people who drink our whiskey, and I love to hear each and every one of their impressions of what they like the most. And there's a very strong segment that says double cask is the best thing we make.
I agree with you, David. Not that I don't think it's an exceptional product, but double cask is probably my least favorite. I'm not fond of sherry unless it's with malt. And that's not saying that I think it's a bad product in the least. I did a lot of R&D to figure out what would pair best, what kind of finishing cask would work best with the small batch profile with that wheat. And I just like you said, outside of that particular port finish, when we weren't able to get that, the PX was what worked best. And that's why I think it just one thing I'd like to say real fast too is that There are a lot of things that I would, of course, dream about finishing in, but at the end of the day, if it does not work with a particular congener profile of the whiskey, then it's kind of a moot point. And I've tried a lot of things in R&D to, see what would go well with the that wheat bourbon profile. And I think the PX is one of the best things I've ever found for it. And so, I don't think we ever just want to do anything just to be crazy, if that makes sense. To have some kind of off the wall cask finish just to have that. The important thing that we're looking for is that it really match the congener profile of the bourbon, and that it complement that it not take over the bourbon ever. It should just be there as something to complement.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree with that, David? I mean, that's
100%.
That's kind of been my thought on it.
100%. And I think the word balance is the word that, you've taught me. Dave Kaplan from Death and Company taught me when he was talking about cocktail making. Nothing, I don't think any of our products are all over the place. There's no super high points and super low points.
Yeah.
And I think Double Cask strikes that balance. Now that we've completely trashed this product that is one of our better sellers, maybe we talk about our favorites. I mean, I guess we have a little. But
that's just as we get at him. Like Spencer's like, well, there has to be a least favorite whiskey, and Mike said, for example, I have a least favorite child. I don't know which one that is, Mike. I don't know which one that is, and I know there's only one that watches the show, so hopefully it's not her.
No, it's not.
Yeah, I love all of our whiskeys. I really do. But if you had to rank them, here's my rankings. I would say Hole in the Wall would be my favorite for my flavor profile. I'm not talking about objectively. I'm talking subjectively. I would say Hole in the Wall. Last year's Statesman, would be right there.
Yep.
I would put the right single barrels, Brown Label, would be number 2.
Okay.
I would put Outrider third. I think Outrider might be the best thing that we make, but it's my third, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And then Double Cask really falls below all of that. Yeah. I mean, I will reach for Double Cask. I have a bottle here, so I will drink it. But that's how I would put it. I like the weeded profile in its naked. Leave it as it is, and let's batch it correctly, or let's pick the right barrels for our single barrel and let her rip. That to me is just, I can drink a lot of that in a good way.
And I think if you're the owner of a whiskey company, that's the way you want it too. You want to be producing something you enjoy to drink.
Right. And we haven't talked about barrel strength, which is yet another unique name of a product of ours. Mm-hmm. And say that sarcastically, of course, but that bourbon was ranked one of the top 10 whiskeys in the world in the spring of 2015 by Whiskey Advocate. And that's the highest reward, or whatever you want to call it, we've ever received. It's not my favorite. Barrel strength, anything for me is a little stout. I mean, if you were listening earlier, I like it along the lighter, the medium side. That would probably fall right above Double Cask for me. Like, I would need to water it down a little bit. I don't have that palate that Nancy has and you guys have. They can really appreciate that. To me, that's still a little strong, although all of our products drink below proof. Wouldn't you agree, Nancy? I mean, nothing tastes.
Without a doubt, the barrel strength. My two favorites would be Outrider and barrel strength, and I'll tell you, when you have barrel strength at just directly from the cask, oh my God, yes.
I It's a little empty. I don't know what happened.
I'm talking about.
Hold on a second.
There is nothing else like that to me, and you know, some of those casks. Well, you know, both the wheat recipe and also the rye-ish whiskey and the rye bourbon, the barrel strength. Oh my God, that's I think some of the best whiskey I've ever had in my whole life. I mean, it's just so freaking good. It's so freaking good. Yeah, there's sweet. Oh my God, what barrel is that, David?
It doesn't even look like it's been cracked.
Nope.
3242.
Oh my God! Oh, I so wanted that barrel.
That's what I was going to say. When you hear a barrel number, and Nancy's like, "Son of a bitch!" Like I wanted that.
Look how dark that is. Look how dark it is. Those are often the leakers.
Yep.
We find, and I love those leaking barrels. Those are just the best. David, do you know how many bottles were released from that one? As I recall, it was not a whole lot.
I want to say it was somewhere in the 70 to 80 bottle range.
Yeah.
Wow.
And there's one right here.
Oh, I hate you. No.
Nancy's going to be busy tomorrow at 9:00.
Yeah.
Right. She better not be. Not this one.
Yeah, we've got an early morning meeting, but yeah, those kind of casks like that are just I would have to say those are probably my absolute favorite, even above Outrider. And I love Outrider. I'm a total rye recipe bourbon kind of gal, but the cask strength are just the best of the best, and not just the best of the best of what we do at Wyoming Whiskey. In my mind, it's some of the best bourbon I've had ever, period. End of story.
I want to know what the joke is that you're laughing at. Maddie.
Me, I wasn't laughing at a joke. I was actually drinking the whiskey, and I was just tasting the brown sugars and stuff, and I had like a little mini happy moment to myself. You guys were talking. I just went to my own place for a second. So I don't know if I was laughing. I was just kind of enjoying myself for a minute.
But to Nancy's point, that's the best thing that we've ever made, you know, at least from objectively from outside folks. And that bottle hasn't been opened because I'm saving it for a special moment, you know, for a special something. And I was willing to give this to a guy at Edrington for a moment, and then I changed my mind. So
we just had someone wondering where they can get it, and it sounds like you can't. You can't get it anymore. No,
can't get it right now.
Okay.
Hold on. There are some bottles. I want to say there's something like 25 bottles that Edrington is sitting on that they're trying to figure out how to deploy them. And it might be through an e-commerce site. It might be through a specific retail group. I'm not quite sure what they're going to do. We do have a barrel. Well, Nancy, I'm still waiting for the report, but I mean, not the dig.
No pressure.
But we do have one barrel that has been tagged for barrel strength, and we're going to wait a little bit. We've got so many things we have to do this fall. But, I have to get some more bottles made and get some sort of packaging together, because you can't sell a bottle for $250 and just have it be bare. So you got to put it in something nice. So that'll be coming out. I don't know, give me 6 months, and that should, you know, make it to maybe just Wyoming. I don't know. We'll see.
I'm gonna have to have my Wyoming friends on the hunt.
Yeah, we have some mules that happen to live in Wyoming, so there's nothing wrong with that. And remember, everyone, it's good to have friends all over the country. That's
right.
That's the best way to put that. It's good to have friends all over.
Yep.
Oh God.
So, let's see here. We're at about an hour and 15 minutes, and Emily, Chambers asked, yes, 25 bottles. That's all they're doing with that other one. And I can see, though, that's something that, like, if you even sit on for a couple of years, I don't know, that you could see someone charging, I don't want to say an excessive amount, but maybe a respectable amount, because you guys don't get into the crazy secondary bullshit too much with stuff. So I was going to say, I think those full strength bottles might go for a little bit more expensive in a couple of years, because I'm jealous. I know what we got to taste was pretty damn exciting at 110 proof. So it was exciting. But we don't want to keep you guys past when you guys have a life to do, and we kind of pulled you away from it. And it sounds like you guys have a meeting tomorrow morning in a few hours as well, too.
We can handle it.
We're good. Yeah, we've had
Well,
full experience in this world.
And I can't get back to my chainsaw. It's dark out, so I'm not going to cut at night.
Safety first.
Have you guys ever thought about working with like in other distilleries on like a blend? So I know like Lost Lantern did one with, like you mentioned, American Single Malts. They did one with like 6 different distilleries. Have you guys ever thought of like doing a blend with other distilleries with some of your product?
I was going to say something really sarcastic, but I'll
No. Bring it out. That's what.
Why would we work with someone inferior?
To prove your greatness.
Yeah.
to prove that your notes are what shine through the whiskey.
To establish dominance.
Now, so of course I'm going to crack some jokes. No, we haven't really thought about it. Not for that reason, of course, but we're kind of out here in the middle. No, you know what? Yes, I came up with an idea years ago, and it was about barrel maturation. Nancy, you and I talked about this a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to do 3 distilleries. I wanted to do 1 distillery in Texas, 1 distillery in New York City, and us. And I wanted each of us to make 6 full-size barrels.
Right.
2 of them would stay on site, and then the other 2 pair would go to the other places. And we would age them for 5 years. And then at the end of the 5-year period, I don't know what we would do with them at the end of the day, but we could come up with something super cool as far as packaging or blending or whatever. But more than anything, I wanted to see what the different terroir was and what the impact was in those environments, because you would have the same base spirit made on the exact same day into 6 exact same barrels, right? Mm-hmm. And then you ship them to these different environments. You get the southern arid climate in Texas, you get an urban environment in New York City, and you get Wyoming, cold as hell and hot as hell. So what is that going to do to those whiskeys? And you would get their whiskeys here in Wyoming. And I thought that would be a great experiment. And I tried to get this going, and they weren't interested. So
we should work on that a little further up. I'd love to do that.
It'd be fun.
Oh God, that'd be so much fun. Yeah.
For the whiskey nerds,
yeah,
that sounds like a whole wonderful tasting evening. I don't care what 6 barrels they came from, which distillery they aged at, but that sounds 6, 12. That sounds like 18 samples that we should be getting through that night.
Exactly. You never know. I mean, maybe they're going to taste exactly the same. Maybe you dispel this myth about terroir and it's all BS. Probably not. I think you're going to find that you're going to get very distinct flavors from these different environments. And so, yeah, I would love to do it. I would still love to do it. So, Nancy, yes, we should talk about it. We should find out if, I know the distilleries I'd like to work with. It's just a question of seeing if they're savvy to it.
I'm totally on board for that. I would love to do something like that.
No. The chat's saying you better get on that. That'd be amazing. You guys should do it. We're all behind it because, like I said, that even if you just went, say you went to Texas or Wyoming and you got to taste this, like you said, it's just how the terroir regionally changed it. And then, like on a bigger scale someday, maybe being able to taste some of the other ones, like it would be an awesome science project. We love science projects.
For
so
science.
That's the best type there is.
There's a question I'm seeing from Aaron.
Yep, I was just about to put that up.
Yeah.
You are so good. You have such better eyes than I do. I love it.
I really don't. I've got my reading glasses on right now, and then because my bifocals don't really work on here. How I finish, how I match finishing cask types to the congener profile of the whiskey. So first of all, if you're working on, you take your base whiskey and you look at the tannin profile of that whiskey. For instance, if it's kind of shy on the tannins, or if the tannins are very harsh and up front, very angular, and such. And you also look at the congener profile of the distillate itself. It's a very kind of light and vodka-like versus being very forward, very fruit forward, very, there's a lot going on with the distillate itself. And then when you pair that with your finishing cask, what you want to look for in the finishing cask. So, for example, if I'm making, when I was originally formulating Wyoming whiskey and finding out whether or not the PX cask would work, for that, one thing I was looking for was the age of our barrels, being 5 to 5.5 years old, or maybe slightly older than that too. And I wanted to pair that against the age of those barrels. So if the barrels were, the PX barrels were too much on the younger side, and they would have had too much tannin for them, or too much tannin, the kind of young angular tannin in there, that it would have completely just overridden the bourbon itself. So that's in general what you want to look for, is to be able to take whatever kind of distillate you're looking for, you're initially working with, and you want to be able to pair that well with the finishing cask. And the last thing you want to do is to take say a bourbon that has too many tannins in it and pair it with something that's got way too much tannin in it. And some of those European casks tend to have that. So what I'm always looking for, with double cask, for example, are PX casks that are a little on the older side, maybe 7 to 10 plus to 12 years old, or they don't have too many tannins to offer, but they do still have enough of the sherry itself to offer. And we're looking for, we don't want too much sherry in the expression, but just enough to kind of complement that product. So just, I don't know how well I articulated it, after, several, between Hole in the Wall and Outrider. but that's, what I'm looking for, is to be able to pair those things very well. And, not everything works with the bourbon that you're working with, So, I find PX sherry cask just really, it's like bread and butter or peanut butter and jelly. Works really well with the Wyoming whiskey wheat bourbon profile. So does that make sense?
I think that works for everyone here.
Okay.
Yep,
That's
it works for everyone here, Nancy. No,
Yeah,
no one's complaining in the chat.
right now.
Yeah, no one's gonna say, "Oh, bullshit, Nancy."
But yeah, there are things that you're looking for to be able to match. You start with what you have to work with, and thanks, Sharon. I appreciate that. You start with that, and then you look for finishing casks that will complement it. You never want for the finishing casks to override the bourbon itself. The bourbon notes ought to be first and foremost always, and then any kind of highlight above that, is what you're looking for.
So I've got a question for you, David. With your whiskeys that you've got, do you guys come up with a plan to say we want to stay within this bubble or this type of, we don't want to go out to here, we don't go out to here? Was there like a plan for what types you were going to put out, or you're just kind of going with it?
In the early days, I can't say we had any plan. It was Steve was there. We were adopting the Maker's Mark approach, and it was, let's make one thing and let's make it great. Which is why when the whole Outrider thing came up, he was so unready to make rye, and the whole rye story. So I was charged with making sure I had my finger on the pulse of what was going on in the industry. I saw that people were starting to drink rye. We got to be looking when you're growing your own grain, you got to be looking almost 7 years ahead. So we kind of just took it as it came. We chose for sure to not go into the clear spirits category while we were waiting for our bourbon to age. Our name is Wyoming Whiskey. We're not going to make vodka. We're not going to do anything else. We're going to stick to our name.
The whipped cream vodka isn't in your profile.
It can be on certain nights, but not when it comes to Wyoming Whiskey. So when it comes to the guardrails, I guess, that we put on ourselves, we wanted to make a wheated bourbon. That's what we're continuing to do. Outrider is really the first thing that falls outside of that category, of those guardrails. And I'm so glad we went there, because it really has been a leader for us. And we have had conversations about all sorts of things since we partnered with Edrington. American malted whiskey. Are we going to do that?
That's a good question.
I don't want to.
Okay.
Now, I'm just one vote, but
Right.
it's just like, that's not what America is known for, in my opinion. But Edrington, they're much better. They're more savvy business-wise than I am. They're thinking there's a space here, and if we could put something out that could compete with some of the great American, whiskeys that are in that category, then we could grab some market share. I don't look at it so much as grabbing market share. I look at it more as, what are we? And for us, we're a bourbon distillery and straight American whiskey and rye, and that's what we do. So let's just keep doing that better than anybody else. But I'm a simpleton when it comes to some of this. Do the malt. Who's the Spencer guy?
He's someone getting us in trouble.
Do the malt.
He's just a Canadian. Just kidding.
That's right.
Actually, was he in Utah, or where's he at? Do you guys remember? Spencer, where are you at, buddy?
I thought it was
I
like
know you're
Montana.
not in Canada.
I thought it was like Montana or something.
Yeah.
I think he's in Omaha, Nebraska. Maybe I'm wrong. We have to. I don't remember where all our fans live.
I know.
I'm sorry. I don't keep that good of tabs on all of you out there. It's just not what I do.
Omaha. Yeah, you're right.
Okay.
Omaha.
There you go.
So I have to say I can see where Edrington might be leaning on you that, because we think American single malt might be like the next, where you were saying you hit on rye and kind of leaning that way. We were thinking American single malt is kind of leaning in that direction over the next couple of years. But that's more because some of the people are starting to get to having between 5 and 10-year-old releases, where before it was a little young for the American single malt. But then there's whatever. There's some 2-year-old whiskeys that are actually decent sometimes too. So it's all in all the factors that go into it. So,
well, again, thinking generationally, that's one way to look at it. If we got our start in the single malt category now, we wouldn't have something for 10 years.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it'd take about that long in Wyoming for it to come online and swell. I mean, I'd love it personally, but it, that's a long term.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's like when you're getting into brand, you were like, "Well, I'll see you in 20 years."
Yeah.
Right.
That's a put away I'm not really ready to do. Like
That would be pretty interesting though, because I really think that you guys would do it well, but you are kind of in a unique position that if you were going to do something, especially the malt, but then maybe finishing it, not to copy, but like Virginia does, you've got a pretty good hand on some good barrels that you would probably be able to get to finish it in, so you could do an American single malt, and then and here's a marriage with our partner company. I whatever you guys are doing, great. But if you did do it, I wouldn't sell you so short. I think you guys would do a great job at it.
We would definitely have a nice head start considering our partners, and we would have access to great barrels, and I think we could do a good job at it. I don't know if we're doing it or not, candidly.
No.
I mean, I can tell you that it's been discussed, but at the moment, there's no immediate plans to do it.
That's fair. There's a lot of options, like you said. Trying to stay at the top of your game where you're at is a job in and of itself. There may be a lot of craft distilleries going by the wayside, but there was a lot of them out there, and I thought that there might have been a crash before now or before the end of the year, a year or two ago, because with beers in Wisconsin, like in Green Bay alone, we must have 9 breweries. You're not selling to a larger scale. You're almost selling like hyper regionally, where you're trying to. I own Northeast Wisconsin, but I'm not going to be able to get into Milwaukee because all the Milwaukee breweries have fucking Milwaukee, and you're not going to be able to get your stuff in there as much.
Right.
So I was thinking some might go by the wayside earlier, but the way you guys are thinking and planning, you're another one that's planned past where we are now, which is great to see. And then there's not enough people doing that. Some people are being, I don't want to say short-sighted because it's their money and it's their company, but if you can plan to stay around for a little bit longer, or kind of keep your money in the game, keep yourself in the game longer, I think it's going to pay off in the next couple years quite a bit, where you might become more prominent.
I would rather continue to hone what we're doing and get better yet, because we have room for improvement. We've made mistakes. We continue to discover mistakes. I mean, that's the nature of business. And I would rather focus on what we're doing and knock it out of the park than start to diversify into an area where, like Spencer wants us to go, we may not be that good at it.
So are you guys constantly tweaking, like from batch to batch? Just for example, with your small batch bourbon, kind of tweaking the recipe a little bit, or doing things a little different from batch to batch to see, constantly push for something better. I know with like Iron Root in Texas, Jonathan, Robert, their philosophy is with every batch they're doing something a little bit different, because it's that whole concept of, well, you can't actually achieve perfection, so we're constantly pushing for it, and we'll make little changes to see how further we get there. Or are you kind of locked in on a recipe and how you're doing it at the moment?
Well, I'll start answering the question, and then Nancy, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, sure.
When it comes to our small batch, we're trying to be as consistent as we can possibly be with the flavor profile. But thanks to Nancy and to Derek and everyone who's working on it, we're making subtle refinements as far as the quality, and the techniques that we're applying to it. So we don't want to change small batch, at least at this moment. If Nancy next summer is tasting through those 18-month yard-aged barrels with every 8th toasted head, and she says, hey, I think that we should do something with this, and I think in our 45 barrel batch, or for a small batch, I think 3 of them should be this product or that barrel, because it's going to add a subtle difference. And we could do that into the future. That's the type of thing we could consider. But small batch is not our experimentation SKU. Mm-hmm. That's supposed to be our foundation. And then we could have a lot more fun with single barrels. We could have a lot more fun do Outrider and how we're going to be blending it into the future. Mm-hmm. And so I would rather be pushing the limits on our other products. How do we make double cask even better? How are we going to use these Edrington casks, and are we going to assimilate that into the double cask program, or is that a new product? But no, to answer your question, we're not trying to change small batch. We want that to remain consistent as the flavor, but the quality, we want to continue to push it. And if that means it's going to be barrels that are 6 months older as we move down the line, then so be it. But that's the way that we're challenging ourselves with small batch. Nancy, do you agree with that, or do you disagree?
200, 1,000%. I think as we're trying to keep small batches consistent as possible, and if anything, I've seen the only changes that we've made is that the average age of the cask that we're using for that product have actually gone up. Mm-hmm. And so it's changed in that way, but the aroma profile has basically stayed the same, and that's a product we don't want to change up too much. I agree 1,000% with what David had to say just now about all of that, and
you want to keep your flagship the same when someone goes back to it.
Yeah, and the age of the stock, has increased on it, and so in that sense, the aroma profile has changed a little bit, but the way it goes in general, and is not really changed that much. And I work with Iron Root too, so I know what their profiles are like, but I have to say that given the amount of what we the kind of stock that we have available at Wyoming Whiskey is it's not because it's column distilled, it's going to be very vastly different than what most any other distillery in the craft world has. That does pot distillation. We have a lot more at our disposal too. So yeah, I back up everything David has to say, 1,000%. By the way, gents, I'm going to sign off for now. I need to I've had an intense day. I need to grab some dinner, and I've got a very early
We can't talk you into 3 more drinks before you go to dinner?
I've got to finish off my little bit of hole in the wall here and sign off for now. But anyway,
we'll talk in the morning.
Yeah, thanks for stopping in, Nancy. Yeah. We always appreciate you dropping in on a stream. So
thank you, Nancy.
Yeah, thanks again, Cheers. And David, I'll see you bright and early. So.
All right, good night, Nancy.
At least it wasn't bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. It's just bright and early.
Don't ask for the impossible here. All right, Jen. So see you later.
All right, later, Nancy. You have a good night.
Nancy.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.
And we won't keep you on too much longer, David, but this was an off-the-balls question. I don't think you have an answer, but I wasn't really ready for it either. Has anybody aged a barrel on a ski lift 24/7 for multiple years? It's kind of like the space whiskey, and when he came up, that he would call it whiskey, like SKI, where I thought it was interesting. I doubt that has ever happened.
No, not that I know of. I don't think that's ever happened. We haven't done it, but I can tell you that I would like to age a barrel in the wide open. Like it's illegal because of all the safety, requirements with the TTB, but I would love to take 2 barrels and put them in the middle of a field here in Jackson and just let them sit. And I think that would be fascinating to see what the sun does to that. Wasn't it Buffalo Trace? One of the distilleries in Kentucky ended up having a roof failure, and some of the barrels were exposed to the elements, and they made some big marketing play out of it. I don't know if anything actually changed with it, but I would love to see what would happen in that type of an environment.
I think it did. It changed the whiskey because it was getting more air content. Actually, Gary was talking about that last week. And I don't remember who he said it was. But couldn't you, I mean, there's not such rigid rules on a warehouse. Couldn't you do a warehouse that maybe
is open on the sides?
Well, wasn't that big, but the sides, like maybe it held 10 barrels, but maybe the sides came up, or something. So then you could just let the air run all the way through it.
I don't know what the TTB would approve or what they wouldn't approve. You guys have to understand the dynamic in our company. I'm the one who's always pushing to do the crazy stuff, and let's try this, let's try that. I wanted to do accelerated maturation in the beginning, and Steve said no. Lincoln Henderson was an advisor to ours, and he was all about accelerated maturation, if you know anything about him. Mm-hmm. And Steve was a traditionalist. He didn't want to do that. Well, I was able to push through this accelerated maturation room where we heated up whiskey over the course in the middle of winter. What is it, Boyle's Law, that gets in the way, and basically the barrels exploded. And so Steve called me. He did not hesitate a minute to call me and say, "Nice idea, asshole." And the barrels exploded. So that was a failed experiment. But our first barrel strength barrels 442 and 443, were barrels that he was able to repair, plug the leaks, put it back in the warehouse. They continued to leak over the next however many years. That one of those barrels is what got us one of the top 10 whiskeys in the world. Mm-hmm. So, we were doing accelerated maturation for something else, and then ended up with that very lucky result in a different area. So I'm always trying to do the different things. I'd love to do one with the roof opens up and let the sun beat directly down on the barrels. But Brad is far more practical and likes to keep me on a shorter leash than that.
I think it would be neat because a lot of times, the barrels will pick up smells and flavors from the air around it. Like if you're in a city that has a lot of smog, sometimes you'll pick up some of that soot and some of that smog flavor to it. So I think being out in a Wyoming field would turn out amazing. Just the crispness and maybe some of the smells and flowers and everything else you would pick up from out there. Yeah, I don't know if John said, how about a chain link warehouse? That might be. Yeah. We're just trying to find ways for you to cheat, David. That's all. There you
go. I know Treaty Oak in Texas. What did they bury a barrel in a field?
Yeah,
I think it just this past summer and dug that up to bottle it. Yeah.
Well, you could leave it out in one of the cow fields and just get a bunch of manure on it and see what kind of nutty flavor that produces.
Yeah.
For all those peat lovers, we have something for you now.
Yeah.
Where's shrooms growing on those barrels?
But we're coming up on it.
I'm going to sign off here in a minute if that's okay with you. I need to have my second dinner.
That's fine. I was just going to say it's been an hour and about 45 minutes, and I think it's time to kind of call it anyways, just because we appreciate you coming on and taking some time out of your day and spending it with us, because we know we came after the workday. We didn't throw it in the middle of it. So thank you very much, David, for coming on. We really appreciate getting a little pull behind the curtain with some of the stuff you guys are doing there.
It's an honor to be on the show. Appreciate all of the questions and all the humor that we've had this evening. I know you guys trashed me on the last show when I didn't show up, so I figured I had to really give it a little extra on this one. So here we are.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Everyone in the chat, thanks for stopping in. Remember to stop in. Where are we? Next Monday is Martin Duffy from the Gun Carrying Glass Company will be on. We're going to be talking about some of the glasses that we're all drinking out of and their 20-year anniversary that is going on this year. So join us next Monday for that. And thank you, David, and everyone else out there. And remember, it is not the size of the den that matters. It's the love of whiskey. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
Let's get into it. 1, 2, 3.